Good day, student. I'll be introducing you to study section 11, experimental design. This is STA 201, statistics for agriculture and biological sciences. An experiment is a process of study that results in the collection of data. The results of experiments are not known in advance. Usually, statistical experiments are conducted in situations in which researchers can manipulate the conditions of the experiment and can control the factors that are irrelevant to the research objectives. This study section discusses the definition of experimental design, principle of experimentation, and types of experimental design. Let's move on as we talk about what you are expected to learn and know at the end of this video tutorial. On the completion of this study section, you should be able to define experimental designs. You should be able to explain the principles of experimentation, and lastly, you should be able to mention and explain the different types of experimental design that we have. Experimental design is the process of planning a study to meet specified objectives. Planning an experiment properly is very important in order to ensure that the right type of data and a sufficient sample size and power are available to answer the research questions of interest as clearly and efficiently as possible. Experimental design deals with the number of methods constructing and analyzing comparative experiments, such as comparing the effect of different factors or treatments. Planning experiments is made much more effective if you understand the advantages and disadvantages of different experimental designs and how they affect the experimental error against which we test our differences between treatments. There's the need to understand how experimental design as well as treatment and replicate numbers impact on the residual degrees of freedom, and whether you should be looking at one-tailed or two-tailed statistical tables. Experimental design ensures that maximum precision is achieved for the amount of effort expended on an experiment. In every design, it is important that the rules of the treatment should be well defined and the objectives of the experiment properly understood. An experiment is a systematic procedure for making observations under controlled conditions in such a way that they can be used for arriving at general conclusions regarding the population under study. An experimental unit is a plant or animal or group of plants or animals making up a single replicate of a single treatment. It is called a plot. Treatment of different objects or procedures which are to be compared in an experiment are called treatment. That is, treatment means different objects or procedures which are to be compared in an experiment. The object that is measured in an experiment is called the sampling unit. This may be different from experimental unit. Let's move on as we talk about principles involved in experimentation. There are three types of principles involved in experimentation, and these are randomization, replication, and local control, which is also known as error control. There are different types of experimental design. We are going to discuss them briefly, one after the other. The first type is completely randomized design, which is CRD. We have randomized block design, we have Latin square, and lastly we have sample factorial experiment. Completely randomized design is the simplest type of experimental design in which treatments are assigned as random to a set of plots. It is applicable when homogeneous, that is same experimental materials, is used on heterogeneous, which is different experimental units or treatment, which is replicated more than once. CRD ensures that treatment allotment is completely random, thereby avoiding biasness. A one-way analysis of the variance is used in the analysis of CRD. Example of such simple experiment is the effect of different fertilizers and treatment on yield of maize, evaluating the effect of a feed of different protein levels treatment on growth of quails or fish of the same age, sex, and size. So these are examples of completely randomized design, CRD. Then we have another type, which is randomized block design, RBD, randomized block design. This is an experimental design in which the total area is divided into blocks and all the treatments are arranged within each block in a random order. It is the probably that most wide used experimental design. It is probably the most wide used experimental design, and there are two sources of variation, which are the treatments and blocks. In RBD, we have two sources of variation, they are the treatment and blocks, and therefore a two-way analysis of variance is used to analyze data obtained. Example of a randomized block design experiment is one to experiment to determine. It's like an example is an experiment to determine the response of quiz of different age groups to different dietary protein levels, response of 5 varieties of meats to their to 3 levels indole acetic acid, and so on and so forth. Let's talk about Latin square. It's an experimental design in which the number of rows and columns and treatment are equal, and each treatment occurs just once in each row and column. As the name implies, a Latin square is a square design in that it consists of the same number of blocks, though these do not have the same square in 2 dimensions. The dimension of the square is the number of treatment in the experiment. Then we have the last type of experimental design, which is a simple factorial experiment. A factorial experiment is one in which the treatment allocated to the experimental plots are combinations of 2 or more factors, hence the term factorial. For example, you might wish to test the effect of some measurement of a number or different fertilizers on more than one plant variety. Each plot will then be allocated the combination of one level of fertilizer or one of the fertilizers applied to a level of variety as one of the varieties. I hope that you have learned 1 or 2 things in this slide, and I hope that you will continue to learn more in other slides and in other video tutorials. Thank you for listening.